Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. We are thrilled today to welcome really a program partner of Missouri Farmers Care. We have partnered with the Sand County Foundation for 5 years now to present the Leopold Conservation Award Program to outstanding, exemplary Missouri private landowners and farmers. And one key in that relationship in that program has been Lance Irving. He is National Program Director with Sand County Foundation. Welcome, Lance.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about your role and
Sure.
what Sand County Foundation does, and then what the Leopold Award looks like across the country.
Sure. So Sand County Foundation is a 501c3. We're based in Madison, Wisconsin, though we work throughout the country. We're a little bit over 50 years old, so we've been around a little while. And I have the honor and privilege of being the National Director of the Leopold Conservation Award Program, which is probably the program we're most known for. And what that is a program that began in 2003 in the state of Colorado and has since expanded to now we're going to present in 23 states this year. And it recognizes farmers, ranchers, and foresters, those who actually work on the land, for showcasing that conservation and production can and should have a symbiotic relationship, and that the farmers, the ranchers, and the foresters are the ones that are improving wildlife habitat and soil health and air quality and all that sort of good stuff. So it's our way of recognizing in each state that the program's active in, one worthy recipient of the year and holding them up as what is possible.
Yes. So it was just listening to that reminds me why it was such a natural collaboration. That is part of what we want to share too, is that even over 90% of land in Missouri is in our hands, in farmer and rancher hands. It's in private land. And so clean air, clean water, abundant wildlife come from our farms and ranches across the state. And so it's been so rewarding to see the best examples of private landowners, management and principles and long-range vision exemplified through the Leopold Conservation Award Program, that we've just been able to elevate practices. I still, though, go back to that very first recipient, Kate and Matt Lambert from Laclede, when Kate stood up and said, the amazing thing is there are hundreds and thousands of more farm families just like us doing this. You know, we're receiving the recognition for our land management principles, but know, consumers, that there's more of us than meets the eye, right? That you're not seeing this work necessarily going on while you're driving down the highway. But land management, stewardship principles are a driving factor for Missouri's farmers and ranchers. And it's been a great partnership to be able to highlight some of the best examples of that.
Well, it's been a great partnership on our end too, working with your organization. It's true. There's not enough good news out there, but there's good news stories happening every day on farms and ranches. And as I like to say, I've never met a farmer or rancher that wakes up in the morning and goes, I want to harm the land. It's just not, it's not the actuality. They want to do right by the land. They want to improve their land. And in the vast majority of cases, one of their long-term overarching goals is to leave the land better for the next generation. And it's wonderful to shine a light on that and help bring awareness to the fact that that's going on all throughout Missouri and all throughout the nation.
Exactly. We love the stories that we see not only from here in Missouri, but of those Leopold recipients that we've met and that we've seen their stories highlighted from across the country. There is a great brain trust out there, not only of individuals who wake up each day and say, how do I make this better today and for the next generation and position that next generation, but are even moving the envelope each and every day, right? Our Leopold recipient this year, Jocelyn and Abby Yoder, who are engaged in the Soil Health Partnership, really pushing the envelope on how we use science, technology, and data capture to quantify the principles and practices that we're using so that we can continue to hone those and improve those down the line. Well, that's where we are today, with lots and lots of science and technology employed on our farms and ranches every day. But let's step back over 100 years and tell us that the namesake of the Leopold Conservation Award is obviously Aldo Leopold, who has some Missouri roots. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration.
Sure. So Aldo Leopold is an absolutely fascinating individual, and I encourage all the listeners to go take a few minutes and research him a little bit. I'll give you a brief overview, but there's so many more layers to him. Aldo was born in Burlington, Iowa, and as a young man, just exploring the wild areas around, much like a lot of kids in rural America do today, the little woodlot, the field, just exploring that, and he got enchanted by nature. And around that time, he was born in 1887, and around that time, the Yale School of Forestry began a forestry program, which was one of the first of its kind. And so he decided that if there's an opportunity to go to school for forestry, that's what he's going to do. So he was educated at Yale in the School of Forestry. And after his graduation there, he ended up going to New Mexico, working for the Forest Service, doing some amazing things. Like it's things that are almost incomprehensible today to realize what he was pioneering. He wrote the first comprehensive management plan for the Grand Canyon. He was the first one to advocate for and push forth a wilderness area in New Mexico. And so he really cut his teeth there, learning about all sorts of wild places and unexplored territories, and just neat stuff. And then he headed back to the Midwest. And he moved back to Wisconsin, but Wisconsin was his home base. He explored the Midwest extensively. And he moved to Wisconsin in 1933. And so travel wasn't quite as easy then as it is now, but he went all through the Midwest, down into Missouri, exploring, taking surveys of birds and game animals, and really being one of the first to understand that humans are part of the system. They're not separate from the system, and that comes into a lot of his teachings, but they are part of the system. And he had such an amazing wide view that he was based in Wisconsin, but he did not just look at Wisconsin. He looked all throughout the Great Lakes region, through the Midwest, and realizing that those things are connected. So it's a neat thing. He was the first professor of wildlife management in the world. And now that's a fairly common vocation for folks. He was the very first. And I think what makes him as relevant today as when he was doing his writing and his teaching is some simple concepts that, he defined wildlife management as the art of making land produce sustained annual crops of wild game for recreational use. Now, if you go to the hunting aspects, you see lots of deer management. If you're a birder, how to create habitat for birds, all these sort of things that are fairly common today, he pioneered all of that. So really a fascinating individual, and above all else, curious. Wanted to know why things happened the way that they happened, and what his actions would result in. So that's kind of the basis of who he is and his exploratory nature. And he's a fantastic individual.
I love that the Yale educated forester ended up in the desert Southwest to start with, and can't
Yes.
imagine how rich and abundant coming back to, he spent a lot of time in the Ozarks. I know he owned some ground on the Missouri-Arkansas border in the Ozarks. I can't imagine how rich and abundant those forests seemed compared to a man who loved trees and found himself in New Mexico and in Arizona in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, absolutely. And it's fascinating to me. He was a prolific author, numerous books, hundreds of articles. And you can see he's eloquent in the way that he writes and the way that he communicates ideas. But you could also see the evolution of his thought process, much like almost a child growing up and understanding more and more things. My favorite writing of his and my favorite kind of teaching is that he believed that wildlife can be restored by the creative use of the same tools of which destroyed it or diminished it. And that's the axe, the cow, the plow, fire, and the gun. So he was really the first person that said, well, we can do things that harm the land. We can also use those same tools to heal the land and perhaps even make it better than when we arrived. And that concept was just revolutionary at the time. And for some people, it's still revolutionary today, that things like, hey, a cow is a phenomenal tool for creating habitat. And that was written 75 plus years ago.
Yes, those are great insights, but you're exactly right. The places, I'll speak personally, on our farm where our ruminants want to go graze also make spectacular white-tailed deer habitat. Absolutely. Here in North Missouri, for instance, used in balance, which was a theme of Aldo Leopold. Right. That balance can lead to a harmony across production and wildlife as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So share with us some great Leopold quotes. There are some fantastic quotes. So what are some of your favorites?
I think the far and away the favorite is when he quotes, "We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." And that's it's a simple concept, but has so many different layers. That land as a community is a basic concept of ecology, but that land is to be loved and respected is more of an ethical statement. And one of the things that sets Leopold apart, his idea of a land ethic is kind of simply stated that we are part of the system, and that we, much as you wouldn't go harm your neighbor, try not to harm the land of which you're a community. It's not that humans don't have needs, don't have to produce things, don't have to do certain things. It's just be aware of the implications of that. And there are ways to make very positive aspects of whatever actions you're taking on the land.
And I think agriculture today, when we have farmers talking about earthworms, for instance, yep, or the microbiome of the soil, right? We are very much as connected as effectively as we've ever been with the whole ecosystem of our farms, right? Or of our communities. Right. It is broader than that. But when we're focused on what we can't even see underneath the surface of the soil, I feel like we embody that better all the time, that Absolutely. We make that connection.
Absolutely. Leopold, most folks that know about Aldo Leopold oftentimes know about him from the book A Sand County Almanac. sold millions of copies. I think it's one of, if not the best-selling environmental book of all time. And it was written in 1949, or published in 1949. But what I think resonates with a lot of people, and especially folks in the agriculture community, is the Sand County Almanac in large part is written about the Shack property, which was 80 tired acres that Aldo and his family bought in central Wisconsin outside of Madison. And his observations on closely observing a particular piece of land, not just, while he was wonderful at going and seeing great landscapes and doing that, he really got to know this smaller piece of land. And I think that is similar to many farmers and ranchers that I talk to. There is nobody that knows their land better. I mean, they can tell you, a 2-foot elevation change on the back 40 that nobody's been on in 2 years, but they know it. And he knew that land and told the story of what he's doing by his close observations of that. And I think that's what farmers and ranchers have the ability to do today, is they know exactly what is going on in their land. And when you empower them with the knowledge of how they can make it a little bit better, they try to make it a little bit better. And now, as more and more scientific knowledge and technology comes out, we have the ability to better understand, the microbiome going on in soil and the role of earthworms and water infiltration and how it changes depending on tillage practices and all this sorts of stuff that we didn't have the access to 50 years ago. But now we do, and they want to do right by the land. And I think that's what Leopold was getting at, is give the private landowners the opportunity to make their land better, and we as a community benefit from the results.
Absolutely. And I think that our Leopold recipients have lived out that role, and it's our goal. One of the goals of the program, right, is not only the 6 points that are application criteria that include ecological community and innovation and resilience, but also leadership and communication, because as we elevate their practices, we just really are elevating best practices, raising the bar for everybody, letting everybody know what's possible. I love when they said, I know neighbors drive by our farm and scratch their heads and just wonder what we're doing this year. But it helps all of us. They're really charting a course that it helps everybody figure out what those parameters, how far can we push the envelope in this balance of, cover crops or strips or whatever it may be, that innovative grazing practices that we can maximize not only the natural environment, but our production off that natural environment. So, all of this conversation has been prompted by, as we are around Earth Day, and that's a celebration when everybody thinks of their connection with the earth. I think you're right. For farmers and ranchers, we know that. We're living that all the time, right? Our livelihoods, our success, our passions are all inexorably linked with the health of the land around us. And that brings us to, it's time again. We have highlighted several great individuals. It is time again to find that new class of Leopold finalists and recipients for the Missouri Leopold Conservation Award Program. And we're accepting applications through June 30th of this year. There is a blue ribbon panel of individuals across the state who determine those best practices and the best example that we have this year. So we are always looking for stories to tell, for successes to highlight, and for farms to use as an example for others that are wanting to follow in their footsteps. So we encourage everyone. That information will be linked in this podcast, can be found on the Sand County Foundation website, as well as the Missouri Farmers Care website. And there's contact information on there with questions. Please reach out to Lance or I. He is tremendously helpful. There's also examples of the applications of our past award winners to see their stories and to understand their practices. There are videos that tell a little bit of insight into their operations as well. So we encourage everybody to check those out as we are celebrating and recognizing officially Earth Day around this podcast.
Wonderful. And I would just like to encourage anyone to take a look at the previous Missouri recipients. You'll get inspired. You'll feel good afterward of knowing what is going on Missouri's working lands. And I'd also encourage you, if you are a farmer or rancher or a forester and you don't quite fit the mold of some of our previous ones, to still go ahead and apply. Across the nation, Leopold Conservation Award recipients have operated on less than 40 acres to hundreds of thousands of acres. It's been first generation, it's been fifth generation, it's been a cranberry grower in Massachusetts to a rice farmer in California to cow-calf to dairy to cash croppers, you name it. The way that you express your land ethic on your farm, on your ranch, is what we're trying to get at. And you're going to know your land better and what's possible and what the best avenues for you to be successful on that land are. And we want to hear about those stories.
Exactly. There's so much diversity in Missouri agriculture, and we have so many stories to tell. Yes. That we can't wait for the continuation for not only this year's recipient, which will be announced at the Governor's Conference on Agriculture in November of this year, but years to come of telling these stories of land ethic, innovation, adaptability, resilience, and stewardship across Missouri's working lands. It's been a pleasure to visit with you today, Lance. As always, we appreciate your partnership and the partnership of Sand County Foundation. This is one that we always say at Missouri Farmers Care. We are a coalition. We can do few things on our own without the strength of Missouri agriculture that backs this organization and the strength of the many, many partners that make our programs happen. So hats off to you in your leadership role in that. We appreciate your partnership.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of Sand County Foundation, we appreciate your partnership in Missouri Farmers Cares, showcasing what's possible in agriculture in Missouri and all these wonderful things. And so excited for another great Leopold Conservation Award recipient this year. And get those applications in.
Exactly. So again, that application's open until June 30th, and we encourage everyone to take a look at that, see if it's a good fit for your operation. You can either apply yourself, or those that work in land and resource management or others can also nominate worthy individuals. So we look forward to seeing those rolling in. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. We can't wait to continue the conversation next time.
Thank you for joining the Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. We're excited to bring you new stories each week. We as agriculturalists have a lot of stories to tell. Stories of resilience, grit, and stories of families that are united by their passion for agriculture. Each week, tune in for a new episode and join the conversation.